Hello all, welcome to a new edition of the Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 107 for Friday, July 21st, 2023. And this is an Open Lines Friday. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantanet, capably joined by Technical Support Manager Patrick Anderson. This is an event we do every Friday to help the community, bring the community together to talk about techniques and challenges and experiences and issues with low code and Plantanet. We record all these. They're out on YouTube, youtube.com/Plantanet, plus our other content pushed out there as well. So do sign up for and subscribe to the youtube.com/Plantanet. We'll run this agenda today. Everyone who's here is familiar with it, but we go around and say hello, and then we'll just start out with first call, and maybe we'll get to some of these other things. After an hour or so, we'll jump into our Afterglow segment, where we turn off the recording and continue the discussion offline. Do engage with us, jump in, show and tell, chat with us. We have very few guidelines, but mute if you have noise behind you, and be nice. You can submit questions and topics in advance using this QR code or links that we put in the emails that we send to you. But yeah, there was no submitted topics today, so we are in free form. And with that, I will say good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, all.
Hey, Patrick. So we go right into first call. Does anybody start with a topic today?
I have a couple things. One is a strange error that I'm seeing that, and then there's a related, just general question. When you create an entity and then you let Plantanet build all of the appropriate forms and lists for it, one of the items is a delete record, and that seems like it should work just fine. I did that on a simple form, a simple collector type form, and then when you click delete, it says that I don't have permission. I'm the host of the site, and I yet still don't have permission. And what am I doing wrong? That I would think if it's built in, it should should follow all of the various rules that you typically make. So in general, before diving into any details, is there something obvious that I might be missing?
So we'd have to test it out. As a host user, sometimes the permissions are a little, it might be having to do with the fact that you're not actually set up as a Plantanet user with the appropriate permissions, but I would have expected that it would work. So
okay. So maybe just logging in as a manager type, I should be able to.
I would think so. Patrick, have you encountered this one? Patrick may have stepped away for a minute.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just to clarify, you're saying that you were deleting a value from one of the built-in entities, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and there is some weirdness around that with the permissions. One of the things so the built-in entities have this a way to override stuff, but the other thing is that it's the error you're receiving on that page, right? There's an error down at the bottom.
Yes,
Yeah.
basically it
So
says the action of deleting, and it gives the number, which is matching with the delete record action.
yes.
The problem.
So what that is a it's actually a display error message that has it has a conditions set on it, and those conditions are has role. I'm pretty sure, based on what you're telling me, I'm pretty sure this is what it is. And those conditions are has role. And I would think it logged in as a super user that, in my experience, that super users are assumed to have any role that exists, so that
Yeah,
you shouldn't be getting that. But certainly one thing that you could do is add to those conditions has role uh, user is super user. That you could add that token, which should take care of it. But still, yeah, I feel like you should not be
But,
getting that. So I think we'd have to
but
look at the specific circumstance to dive into it more.
got it.
so Don, do you happen to have this up and something that you can
Uh,
show, or?
yes, I could do that. If you'd like, I could share screen.
Yeah, that would be great.
Alrighty.
I'm a little confused on exactly where you're getting the error. So regardless, yeah, if it was a little clearer, maybe I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Else.
Well, sure. Let me do just that. So, sharing.
Got it.
And so the page basically uploads a file, gives a couple pieces of information, and uploads a file. And then if you're logged in as a manager type, you'll also see the listing below, which is the people that have filled this out. All right.
Mhm.
And then the idea is if I delete one of these things, I should be able to, as a manager, once I've validated the information that the person is giving me, then I can delete it. I don't need it anymore. So you click on delete and sure, I want to, and you get this error.
Okay. And can you show us the entity that's behind that?
Yes.
Because I think I think I'm.
Let's take a look at the entity. Valid ID is this guy. You want to edit it to see it?
Please.
All righty, there you go.
And the properties.
Permissions, properties first. There you go.
Please. So we have a document
Yeah.
uploaded, and I suspect it's the document that there's a permission thing. And so then if you look at, let's go ahead and look at permissions just so I can see how you've got those set up. So
these people can do it. They can all add and they can all edit.
So I would say as a simple test to sign in as a manager and see if you can delete. And if you can, then it might just be particularly a host thing that's getting you.
Got it. One piece that you mentioned the documents, and is one thing I didn't think to mention, and that is that if we go back to this listing, by the way, I should refresh the page because the delete did work.
Yeah.
It just gave the error that the delete didn't work, that I didn't have permissions, but it did delete it. And the thing I did not mention, which probably now that you mentioned the document, and that was my second question. Why is it that if I put a document in a record, why wouldn't the code to delete the record also delete the document that I uploaded? As the natural thing. One would think that if you have a piece that's specifically tied to this record, that you'd want to get rid of all the pieces. And with that, what I did was I added one line in here, one action in here. So let's go to the buttons and the delete. And I deleted the associated image. Then I delete the ID. So the first thing is, that is the image ID, the file ID. Then this is the record ID, and that's the action that it's saying failed. One would think that, step one, delete the file that you had associated with this record, would be okay. And then when it came back, then the only thing left to do is delete the record. And that's the piece that was in there. There's nothing in here that has a condition on it. So I can, if there was a display message where you drop in the
Yeah, it's not the scenario that I was thinking of when I said that. Not at
but
all.
that's what I'm seeing is these two things here. And
I
then
think-
it fails here, it doesn't get to the refresh, and that's why the listing is not refreshed, but it did indeed delete it.
So Ben has been politely raising his hand. You have some
Ah.
input for us, Ben.
Quick question. I'm curious if this potentially has to do with a foreign key situation, because you've deleted the file first, then you delete the valid ID, which has a link to the file, which is now gone. So between those two deletes, my suggestion is try doing a partial update on that valid ID and nullify the document ID on it. At that point, there should be no foreign key error because it's now blank, and then see if it still gives you that error.
Fascinating. Okay. Partially update valid ID, and the valid ID is ID. And the parameter here, yes.
Yep.
The property update is this guy, and put what, 0? Nothing?
I guess blank should blank it out, I'm assuming.
I think so, yeah.
As
Were you
long as you
getting
don't have it set as required.
Were you getting the error before you
That's a good
It
question.
is set as required. So, and I'm getting the, so first step is the action 343, which is delete the file, then delete the valid ID. The error is occurring on action 326. So it's occurring on delete the valid ID.
Were you getting this error before you started adding the delete file?
I did not try that. I said, why are you, and that was my initial question. Why aren't you guys adding the code to delete the file? Because it was tied to the elements. So, get rid of all the pieces and not leave that in there. So I just immediately said, I want to do that. So I just jumped straight in without trying it. I could delete this guy and run it and see if that works. Well, I assume that it would.
Actually, I'm going to suggest we flip back to my screen, and I've started to reproduce this, so maybe we can.
Sure. All righty.
See if
Stop the share.
I grabbed it. So let's see. All right, so I've created an entity. I'm adding an image. I am the host user here, I believe. And so let's see if I just do a straight out delete. It
Piece of cake.
does that. And so then, but you were sensing that the file wasn't being deleted behind the scenes.
Yes, in fact, I know that it wasn't deleted behind the scenes. I went to the file system and looked, and there the file was.
I think that's correct. I don't think we do. Did you see that? Is that happening on your system?
Yes, and say I agree. The file isn't being deleted.
Right.
And I think that I think we do that purposely, because I think that that we're going under the assumption that we don't want to delete something that we're not absolutely positive you want deleted. I think that's the logic there.
So let's see if we can unwind this. I've set up a very simple entity. We have a document delete test entity. It has a name and a document, and other than that, I didn't generate any. I just let the system generate what it did. So we saw that it allowed the file to be entered, uploaded. The record can be deleted. So now the question is, you don't want to delete it. And I think that's the path that, you want to delete the item before.
Yeah.
So I'm going to Go back here. And this was the path we were kind of on with. So on the delete button, we have simply document delete, delete the item. And so you were doing a what?
Delete file.
Yep. And I'm going to try. So we have a read document. We don't have a delete document. So that's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
And I think that's my identifier here. Yeah, it's doc. So let's see if we've reproduced your issue.
Okay.
Interesting. Well, it's still letting us.
Yours is not set up as required.
Okay.
Mhm.
And let's see if it's gone away here. It actually deleted the file. And this is the one, this is the original. So I'm gonna first I'll refresh this. I'm gonna delete this leftover one so we know what we're getting. We've added it, so we refresh, and we see that it's there, and then we delete it, which runs our new custom logic, and refresh, and it's gone. So the custom logic did it. So now, to Ben's point, it was not set as required. So we'll override that. And try again. My test system is starting to get too many folders, too many things. That's getting big.
While that's running, I think I heard someone say, I don't know if it was Patrick or not, to try using is superuser that token to test for
Yeah,
something.
that was a different scenario that I was thinking about when I said that. So
Oh,
it doesn't
well, no,
it doesn't apply here at all.
I just wanted to mention, for those that are not aware, just a little tidbit of information. If you're going to use user user ID or user is superuser, by default, without supplying it a default value, they only work when a person is logged in. If there is no user context, they return blank. So if you base code off of is superuser and say, treating it as a true false, you're going to crash if that code is used before a person logs in. So if you use it on a page that is set for permissions all users, then what you need to do is if you're going to use that token, make sure you say equals false as the default value so that it always returns to you a Boolean. Same thing with user ID. Default it's like -1 or something like that to make sure that you're always getting a value back. Otherwise, when someone's not logged in, you're just going to get a blank and it'll crash your logic. Just tidbit.
Mhm.
So Don, I think this looks like we've reproduced your issue.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see where we are. What state? The record is gone. The file is gone. So it's the error message seems to be related to, and you were suspicious that it was the delete document, this 1476 in my case action that was failing.
Yes.
Succeeded. This is actually we can prove it here. We'll just false this out and repeat.
The admin log also shows, and in the admin log, it says the error was action number, whatever mine was. Then it was the delete.
Yeah, we didn't get to that point. All right. And okay. And I think we've discovered what the issue was, that your delete, even though I falsed out the deleting the document ended up deleting the record. The key structure is apparently set up such that deleting the document is deleting the record. So let's verify that. Document delete test, and that's the name of it.
Well, that's weird, but interesting.
I think this is the unexpected thing that was getting you in the first place, that deleting the file is deleting the record, and that's unintuitive. I am going to completely.
That really shouldn't happen though.
No,
Because the document is a child of that. Deleting a parent, deleting its dependence or its dependencies further down the line is one thing, but to go back upward should never happen.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I think that probably is the correct functionality, but first we're just exploring what it's doing. So we have a delete file that is the only thing that we have, and then a data source refresh. So we have a nice clean test. I did a false condition before, and now I'm doing very explicit what's going on here. So we do a new and a file. And file exists here in the folder. We do a delete, say yes. It seems to be gone from the record. It is gone from the folder. And we'll repeat this query and it's gone from here. So,
wow.
The conclusion is the delete file is getting rid of the record.
Okay.
And we will take an action item to see if that's the behavior we want to continue with.
Well, that's great to know. I have another situation where I have two files. So going in and doing a delete file, then followed by a delete file, the second delete file would fail because I no longer have I mean, there's no record for it to also delete in the entity that I created.
In
So-
our,
That shouldn't fail because it shouldn't. Well, depending, if deleting the main parent record also deletes all of its documents, then yes. But if it's going up and not back down, then you'll be able to delete your two files directly.
Would the second, would the token would the token be removed? I mean, the you know, like the first token or the first field is file 1, and I say delete file, and the token is file 1, and then I go to file 2. Would that be 0 because the record got wiped out? Or does the, you know,
If it's on a grid, it's in context already.
no,
So the
all right.
moment you hit the button, everything in that row has been saved in memory within the context token names. So they're there.
Got it.
Once
got
it reloads, yes, you're going to lose those contexts.
Well, it would be interesting to see if there was some internal error in your code, because you're obviously adding the step inside your code to also delete the record out of the entity that I created when I delete one of the files that are in that record. So the second time I try to do a delete file, then you're going to say, okay, the next thing I got to do after I've just deleted this file is to go delete that record. Hey, that record's not here. Cause an error. So I don't know what'll happen, but I guess it's something to try out.
You want to be able to delete the files without deleting the record?
Only, you know, to Ben's point, it seems wrong that should happen. It's you know, deleting a dependency shouldn't delete a parent. Deleting the parent, it would make sense to delete dependencies, or to at least have some checkbox that say, do you want to also
Why do you,
dependencies?
sorry, not to cut you off. Why do you have the delete file in there? Did you find that deleting the record didn't delete the files?
Correct. Deleting the record does not delete the file.
So the logic does seem to be reversed.
Right.
But you could switch the order, couldn't you? Delete the record first and then delete the file.
Haven't tried that, but we could certainly try that and see if there was an error. Again,
Sure.
your code might properly handle the situation that the record that it's trying to delete is not there. But the delete record definitely fails.
Well, if you had two files and you wanted the record to exist after deleting the first, I was just thinking you could first assign a new file to the record, delete the one that you were replacing with the new one, and that would effectively allow you to delete the file independently of the record, and vice versa. You just have to have a dummy file you were attaching to it.
Yeah, I think I understand that. Yeah, my thought was that instead of deleting the record from the token, to create a second token, which is equal to the file ID that's in my record, and then using that to delete the file, then it doesn't know that it's associated with the record.
yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think deleting
No,
by itself it knows that it's connected and is doing work for you.
yeah, when you're using, for example, ID, that's a token.
Right.
That's not your record. It doesn't know what it's just a variable.
Yeah, understand.
Putting that into another token does absolutely nothing other than duplicate your data at the time of run.
Well, not the ID, but the file ID.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Whatever it is, they're just variables holding numbers, holding data. That's all it is. It's not an actual record. It's not that, like, because you're using, you know, file ID that's connected to your row, that it knows, oh, this is, you know, a record in an entity. It just sees it as a variable with a value in it.
Understood, but it seems that the delete file action does know that, because
No, that's only because their logic, it's that like a cascade It's somewhere there must be a cascade delete to say that if you're deleting a file, it's doing a cascade delete on anything that's dependent on that file.
Yes.
Dependent on the file. It's the other way around. The file should be dependent on my record. I'm creating a record that puts a file onto the system. When I delete the record, one would think that it would also delete the file. If it
Right,
was
but what I'm
Word,
saying is the way it's working right now, it's seeing it as the record is dependent on the file. So it's doing a cascade delete because it thinks that. Not that it's correct in making that assumption, just that it seems like that's how it's behaving.
Dale, did you just show that it only? I think you showed on your screen that it's only happening if the field is required. Is that correct?
Correct.
yes.
So it's a foreign key constraint that's causing it. That's
So when you set when you set it to not required,
I see. The foreign key constraint is how it's getting associated with my record, the entity that I created.
so with this not required, you can delete the file and keep the record around.
Right.
With it required, it's enforcing it such that if you delete the file, it'll delete the record. We'll bring that to the product team to say whether to discuss whether that's the behavior that we intended, but it is the behavior that it is. Delete file enforces does it take cascade delete back to the record that's dependent, and that does seem troubling. But for you, Don, in your particular case, if you turn off the required functionality, and then, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to handle this.
Right. In my case, I want it required because it is a required field. That's the whole idea. It's to upload it.
I understand that. I'm saying if you turn it off as a database constraint in the entity, you could turn it on in the form and
I see.
still enforce it. So you would force it on input, but you wouldn't. You would not enter it. You would not encounter this unexpected behavior on with delete file.
Yes.
when you make a field required in an entity, it does a whole bunch of other stuff that it really says this is required in a lot, in the database. It makes a whole bunch of changes on actions and stuff like that. But if you don't make it required, like Dale's saying, you have ways that you can still make the user have to enter.
So I'm conscious that Jim has patiently raised his hand.
So the piece and all that to the deleting and everything like that, if you'd made that a list of documents rather than a one-to-one relationship in a document, because right now you don't have a parent-child relationship. You have an equal relationship between those records. So if you delete the document record, it wants to go delete the other side of that too.
So for
Even though you only need one entry in it.
But the problem, it's an interesting case.
Yeah.
The thing is that list of documents doesn't enforce required either.
Right. Then you go back to your form, I think, idea of requiring it at the form level would get the same. At the time I came up with my idea, you hadn't mentioned yours, which I think makes more sense.
Yeah, again, and list of documents turns on a whole bunch of other things. It's now got a linkage table and things like that. So it probably would. I mean, it's a thought, but it adds complexity. So
well, it's just going towards the why are deleting the document? It's going back and deleting the other record.
Yep, and I think the case that you guys were discussing, where there's two different documents, would be a really interesting one to I don't know if we take the time now, but because deleting one file, what happens? Is it going to delete the other file and the record, or is it going to leave something orphaned? And so it's
I can do that on my own because I do have that situation that I'm doing next, and I'll happily report back.
I think
I put my investor hat on, and I say that if it's so confusing to where I say things are required, then I don't want it to be confusing, because I want people to say this is a really cool thing and buy it, and a bunch of people buy it, and that'd be great. If it's confusing, then you get more people to say, wait, I don't get this. Why should I use this? So I am concerned about from that level, but from what we're talking about today, it seems simple that the easiest thing for me to do is just do the delete file, and in the description say, and it'll also delete your record, and it's self-documented, and I'm done. So that's what I'll do. I'll leave it as required because it's working. It deletes the file, and then it also deletes the record, which is what I ultimately want anyway, and I'll be happy with it. I'll test the other one that's got two files and see if the second file blows up, deleting the second file blows up. But if it works, I'll also document that and be happy with it.
Great. Very interesting case. And now physically raising his hand is Ben.
I just wanted to give a little caveat, Don, to what you just said. And maybe I didn't follow what you said, but I think I did. You have to be very careful. I'm sorry, I'm looking over here because the camera's over here on the laptop and the other screen's there.
Sure.
You have to be careful with what you just said, because if, let's say, later down the line, Plant and App decides to change their code and this behavior, you just pigeonhole yourself into a broken scenario.
Yeah, that's true.
So if anything, I think the better way to do it, which would work regardless of whether they make this change or not, would be like what was said before: make your enforcement on the form level. Remove the required on the entity, and then make the required on the field of the form. That way, if and when the day comes that Plant and App changes their logic so that it doesn't do this upwards cascade, it's not going to affect your code whatsoever. You're still manually handling it.
Expensive.
Yep.
So
just checking that does the trick.
We're postulating this is going to solve the entry problem. And we have it currently set as not required. I'm just going to demonstrate that while that's saving. So it's set as not required here. It's set as required here now. So if we add a B record, oh, I'm sorry, we want to first enforce it, and it's going to say it's required. And we pick a file and add it. So now on the listing, the suggestion is that the delete button is left with not only a delete file, but a
delete record.
Delete test with a record ID of E, and so this is should get rid of both the file and the record.
Yep.
So good defensive posture. If we do the change that if we were to straighten out the way that relationship worked, it would we would have to announce it as a breaking change. So and yes, send you back to looking at your code before you, so that you didn't get bitten by this. Ben's point is you're not going to get bitten regardless, doing it the way that
exactly.
If I can make one suggestion regarding that, if Plant and App decides to change it, instead of just getting rid of it altogether, one of the other things that could potentially be done is if you try to delete a file and it's marked as required, rather than delete its parent record, give an error message and say, you know, this is a required field to its parent record, cannot be deleted, or something to that effect, as instead of just deleting the record.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give a warning and stop.
Thank you for putting your product team hat on, Ben. I think that's the right idea. A very good suggestion.
Another product team suggestion. This whole thing was to be able to have visitors to the website upload an ID so that they can then go do another step. And so I created this little thing, used the entity because, you know, trying to use the product as is, and yet I can't because there's no mechanism. I don't see a mechanism. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see a mechanism where just anybody can fill in and create a new record. There's no box on the permissions page that says all users can create records, which is the scenario. So I have to double back and delete all the permission stuff that you put into your, you know, all of the code. So from a product/investor standpoint, that's one of the most common things is, you know, a feedback form or a give me a piece of information, general public form that I can't use as an entity.
There is a workaround for that, Don. So the issue is that that's an unauthenticated user, or it's an all users, and
Yes.
the only thing we do is let them view it. But
Right.
yeah, we have said that we're not going to support allowing them to add, edit, or delete. However, what you can do, there is a if you know you're dealing with an unauthenticated user in your scenario, you can use the load user action to let them act as if they were another user for that purpose. So in the new form, so where you're letting them add a new record, yes, you would have to adjust the permissions, some of the logic, but then in the add button, you would have a load user action that would appear at the top of the stack someplace, and you would use a known username or a user number, and then that record would be created with that functionality, with that user as the create user. But we have other things that rely on create user, so we can't not have the user specified. So
in this kind of scenario, something I've done in the past is I've created a user that's called unauthenticated user, and that use that user identifier here, so that when the record's created, you see that the user that created it was an unauthenticated user. So that's an idea on how you can. So that, because you know, whoever you put here, whatever user you put here is going to be the creator of the record.
Got it.
And that sounds like a good practice, Patrick. So
Right. So maybe
leaving nice tracks for that scenario.
Yeah.
add that to the documentation. Basically, is I guess the real point. If that's the way to solve that problem, and that's like a philosophical part of the product, then definitely when you go to create an entity like that, on the permissions page, maybe a little message that says that if you need to add that, the solution is create a user, or not create, I mean load a user to what Patrick just said, something like that, so that people that are trying this, especially the first form that most people would do is a feedback form, which is typically the public visiting the website can do it. And the first thing that they do when they first buy the product is build this form and get an error and not know what to do.
Good point. I will take an action item to document that. We'll create a video that explains it, or both. Yep. We do kind of have a presumption of, I mean, that's the scenario that you just mentioned is the way that you approach the world. The first thing you're going to do is create a contact form. Other people, our presumption is that people are using it in an authenticated scenario, and the unauthenticated is the
exception.
the exception. And neither is right. We need to support both. So that was a good first call, 46 minutes into the hour. Who else?
Your first call question raised a question for me, which was in that in the error message you got when you turned on the required field for the file.
Yes.
Is that text editable at a field level someplace? Because you're basically your button said this field is required. We have users that wouldn't recognize that as a field, and
yeah, that is a Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, almost certainly is going to be an encoded thing. It's kind of you have a program error, this needs to be fixed kind of message. So it's something that you need to address at the development side. It's not a friendly error message. Kind of in a bigger philosophy, product hat on kind of direction. One of the things that we have on our list is a on error section for every action. Lots of actions have on error button, or several types of actions have an on error section. We have a global on error in mind, which would then allow you on a case like that to catch the error and display your own message. But that's a vision, not an actuality.
Okay.
So please, Ben, play on.
Well, it's not so much a first call, but this whole talk about deleting records and whatnot kind of prompted something in my head that I've been thinking about for a while, and I just keep forgetting to mention it. So I'm actually going to be putting it in as a feature request, but I'm just curious to see what everyone else's opinion is. Whenever, before entities, we used to create our own tables directly. As a matter of just experience, what I have always done for years now is every single table that I create, I always have 5 fields at the end, and that is the common created by, created on, last modified by, last modified on, but the other one is deleted, a flag. I never, ever on a first shot usually delete a record physically from a table. Typically what I always do is I flag them as deleted. I do purges later if it's, where it's appropriate or whatnot. But I noticed that with Plantain app, you don't have that. A delete is a delete. It's a purge. And what I would like to see is the ability where on a delete, we can maybe have a checkbox that says perform a soft delete, which would just flag the record as deleted. And then, the read all can by default not include deleted records, but then the read all can have a checkbox that say include soft deleted records, things like that. And then if you want to do a full purge, you can delete the record again, at a later time. Just don't check the soft delete, or if you just don't check the soft delete from the beginning, it's just going to do a full purge. But the reason I do this is because it allows for auditing, in the sense that if a user deletes something, it's not really gone. And if they turn around and say, oh, it's gone, what happened? Well, I could go and look and say, well, last modified record was by XYZ on this day and time. And the last modification, because if it's flagged as deleted, that's the last thing that can possibly be done to that record. Because once it's flagged as deleted, it's not visible any longer. So I know that that was the person who caused the delete. And I could turn around and say, well, auditing shows that, XYZ deleted on this day and time. And if they turn around and say, oh, well, that was a mistake, we need it back, Okay, well, I could go back in and just flip the deleted back to false and the record reappears. So I don't know if other people would be interested in that feature, but it's something that I, like I said, have been doing for years.
It sounds good to me. Sometimes, enough times to be worthwhile, definitely.
Yes, I often add a deleted property also, and actually I'm searching because I feel like Dale, I don't know if you, or I think that I think this might exist in our system already as a you know,
Best.
yeah, as a request. Yeah, I'm looking forward
Yep.
to.
From a I understand the need, and so I'm trying to think of, if we were to do that, one of the downsides to it is that anybody who's interacted with their data by way of SQL would not recognize if once we were to implement that feature, all of your SQL would potentially need to change to say, is deleted false in terms of retrieving records. And I mean, any interactions that would be done by our actions, we could manage, but any interactions done by SQL, we couldn't manage. So it would be potentially a pretty big breaking change for.
Well, that would only hold true if the person wants to then use that soft delete feature. If you leave it as the default behavior being what it always is, and then offering a checkbox to say soft delete, then they have to understand if you are using any direct SQL, accessing the entities directly, that's on you. And you have to be aware that now if you're pulling out records, you're going to be pulling out the soft deleted records, and you're going to have to add in that extra thing, deleted equals false, in order to do that. But I don't
good point that it could be implemented in such a way that it's on the developer to solve, but it wouldn't break them. So, good point. Seven minutes, small topic. Big topic.
So if anyone wants to vote up on it, they can.
Oh, did you put it in already?
This reminds me of one that's been on my list from the very beginning, really, and that's another property that I'd really like to see is an owned by property for and I have a whole argument for it. It's in our DevOps system, and it's something I really want. But the ability to, because right now we identify records that are basically our way we say a record is owned by a specific user is the created by user, and I'd like to see it so that we have a separate owned by property, so that in listings, when a specific user is logged in, we easily have a way of showing the records that belong to them. And the best case scenario I can think of is a support system. So you have somebody you want them to see their tickets, but as a support agent, I want to be able to create a ticket on their behalf, and when they log in, they see that ticket, and so I'm the creator, they're the owner of the record. And so that's something that I've been arguing for a while. So I think both of these properties would be great properties to add to the entity.
It's certainly nice.
Ben's going to have an argument here, and I can counter any argument you come up with, Ben.
Let's see. I mean, I can understand your thought process on that one. My only thing is, I mean, that could really easily be, in my view, implemented by just creating the field of like assigned by or something like that, and do that. My argument against doing that is that if you add it as a default, like you do with the created by and last modified by and all of that, that's additional information that's going to be stored on every single record and increase your database size unnecessarily. especially if you don't want to use that field.
I don't think, I mean, I hear you. I don't think it's significant. The deleted by property is enough. It's going to, the delete property is going to always be there for every single record as well. But
Right.
I think it yes, you could create it, but and I have done that, but it adds increased complication to your setup when you do that. Whereas if it was integrated as by default, it would be a lot easier to manage.
I'm envisioning the user group meeting when we all get together and we're going to have this knockdown. It's going to be Fight Club, and Patrick and
You
Ben.
can't talk about it.
First rule of low code. First rule of low code. Don't talk about low code.
Yeah, right.
So for anyone who hasn't seen it before, the feature requests are on community.planonet.com. If you're signed in, you can vote on them. I believe you just, the primary way is to come into the thing and click the thumbs up button. Is that the only way? I think it has been.
That is correct. The only way to vote for it is once you have an account, you log in and then open up that item and click the thumbs up. If you're not logged in, you won't have that ability.
You can take your vote away too by clicking again. So don't do that. All right.
Although I like Patrick's idea of adding that additional record, I did have a scenario where I had to do something similar, and what I did was I set it up so that they could the manager type could log in as that person, and then they see everything that that person sees when they log in, and there's no additional change that I had to do to the code. But I could also see another scenario where I would have to go in and do a load user if I knew who the record was that I'm trying to modify. Then I would change the action to first do a load user, that user, and then do the edit or change, update, or whatever the change is to put in a record on their behalf.
That I hear you there, but that's not clean. What's the word I want? It's not tracking everything. It's not clean tracking because there's a detail there that you don't have recorded in your system, and that is who actually created the record.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, or modified the record. Yep.
I've done stuff similar to this because I have a report tracking application that I've written. And like in that particular case, there is, tickets that are assigned to individuals. And what I basically did is I'd say, like, for example, if I'm logged in and I have a particular role, that role would be able to see a drop down on a form filter above the grid or whatever. And by default, it may say all, where you could see all tickets, or by default, it will just default to my current username. But it would have a list of all of the other users. If I flip that to a different user, that will immediately affect the grid and filter it to who I want to see. That's how I've handled it. And, that's only something that's evident and used on those tables that require, that type of level of information. So I still have the created and modified by, so I know who originally created it. So if it was a manager that created it, it'll say created by the manager, last modified by the manager, but assigned to whoever. And then if they change it, you'll see the last modified has been now modified by that person, but you can always see that the original created by was by, that manager person. But as a manager, they would have a filter that no one else would be able to see. So if I'm logged in, I could see that filter, and I can filter and say, I want to see all of the tickets assigned to X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. So just to, I hear you, and just to put what I was saying in perspective is just think about it this way. So we have this default functionality in PlantinApp, right, where you can say that, like in the permissions tab of an entity, you can set for users, yeah, yeah, that's great. We just go to the permissions here, and so we can say who can view, and if you drop down the users drop down there, Dale, we're saying that own entries is an option there, and own entries is based on the created by property in an entity. So that's what it's based on. That's our default functionality. And my argument is that our default functionality when you're using an entity data source for who can see a record, it should be who owns that record, not who created it, because who created it is a very different thing than who actually is the owner of a record. And in my scenario, I was just saying, the basic support agent scenario. As a support agent, I might create a record, but the person who is being supported is the owner of that record. They're the ones who need to see it when they log into the site by default. And so that's really my very basic argument for this.
So I think from a takeaway there, it's I don't know. I would say it's possible to develop various use cases that are I mean, we can use the product as is, and get to those places for all the things we've been talking about, delete flags and add ownership. There's certain things that aren't supported, and then you have to do additional things in low code, which would be the argument against. But it occurs to me that and there's another scenario, I'll bring it into Afterglow, but it's very difficult to be all things to all people, and that might be the danger going down that road. So let's continue the discussion in Afterglow. See you next week.